New York, New York. So much is said about its symbolism of freedom, but not enough has been said about how that freedom is fleeting for people who use wheelchairs. For decades, the city has struggled to make improvements in accessibility for the more than 500,000 New Yorkers with disabilities. In recent years, this has manifested in the fight for accessible taxis. And it seems that this fight is far from over.
This is the kind of soft discrimination that people don't want to identify as discrimination.
I was the named plaintiff in a suit against the Taxi and Limousine Commission. When we began the suit, 1.7% of the taxis were accessible. My husband was in the hospital one time, and I needed to get there to be with him. And I couldn't get a taxi, and I had to wait for the bus. And it took a long time, and I was so distressed and upset and angry that I think that was the thing that just put it over the edge for me.
Accessible taxis is seen as insane, although every taxi in London's been accessible since 1989.
The ferry shut down early, the buses go on different routes, and they don't know where to go.
So, like, what do you do?
You can't do anything, that's the problem. So that's why I'm like very neighborhood bound these days. Just 2 weeks ago, I was at my friend Alberto's house, and he lives in Bushwick. And that's not that far, it's maybe 20 minutes away. But I had no way to get out of there. So I requested a cab. They did it again. At the end, nobody would come. So nobody came to pick me up. It just sucks because that means that I'm not going to be going to Alberto's again.
It's very unfortunate anyone has to be in a wheelchair. And I admire people who can manage their lives despite having that handicap, or I don't know if handicap is even the right word. But that problem was not caused by taxi drivers.
It seems simple. Accessible cabs can pick up anyone. Inaccessible cabs cannot.
No, I had no problem getting the accessible car, or I had no problem driving this car, no.
Why'd you get a wheelchair cab?
First of all, because my car was picked in a computerized system that I have to have a wheelchair cab this term, and it really puts me in comfort that I'm helping out people who needs service on a wheelchair. People, they try to avoid picking up people who are in a wheelchair, and they just don't want to touch them.
There aren't any accessible cabs in the outer boroughs, so I used Wave, Uber's accessibility option, to request a pickup for Jason's apartment in Queens. It never came. The danger of traveling in New York is not knowing whether you'll make it back home.
We won in court, but that doesn't hold water if Uber is not obligated to adhere to laws.
If Uber was held to the same standard, would that solve it? Or is that the magic bullet?
That would certainly solve some of the problem. I personally, this is not part of the lawsuit, but I personally don't think that's a great idea either, because the fact is, only a very small percentage of the population needs wheelchair accessible cabs. Even cabs that are wheelchair accessible are serving 99% of the time or more people who don't need a wheelchair accessible cab. So it really doesn't make sense to have 100% of the cabs, or even 50% of the cabs, be wheelchair accessible, when really, luckily, so few people need them.
%24 of New York subway stations claim wheelchair accessibility. This is one.
You got it?
No. Here I go.
There it is. Thank you, guys.
All right. If the subway isn't really accessible, if Uber and Lyft aren't reliable, if taxis are coming off the streets, what options do people have?
It's when you isolate people and keep them out that people have weird feelings about people with disabilities. I thought by now we wouldn't be having these conversations.
As time passes, people start to recognize certain exclusions of people with disabilities are examples of discrimination. Time and time again, disability leaders in the community bind together and fight for change. This is what happened for city buses, for privately owned businesses, for education. And if history has shown us anything, it's that the fight for accessible cabs is ours to win.